Welcome back to the Metabolic Revolution podcast. I'm Dr. Steve Presciutti, and today I'm about to make some very powerful people very uncomfortable. We're going after the biohacking industry's sacred cows: ice baths, 48-hour fasts, HIIT at dawn, cold showers until your lips turn blue, sauna protocols that would make a Finnish grandfather faint. The biohackers are stressing themselves to death and calling it optimization. Quick reminder, this is educational content, not medical advice. Always work with your healthcare provider before making changes to your health routine. Now let's expose one of the most dangerous lies in modern health. This is episode 23, and if you've been following along, you know we've systematically dismantled the myths destroying your metabolism. We've covered energy as the foundation, gut health, sugar, salt, cholesterol, protein, exercise, fasting, temperature, omega-3s, and last week, circadian rhythms. But today we expose the unifying theory behind almost every bad health trend of the past decade. It's called Hormesis, and it's aged the biohacking community by 20 years while they chase optimal biomarkers. Here's something that's been bothering me for years. Have you ever noticed that the most aggressive biohackers often look terrible? I'm talking about the guys posting about their cold plunges at 5 a.m., their 3-day water fasts, their Zone 2 training, their NAD drips, their rapamycin, their metformin for longevity protocols. Yes, I'm looking right at you, Brian Johnson and Gary Brecka. They have perfect labs. Their HRV is through the roof. Their VO2 max would impress an Olympic athlete. But they look like they aged 10 years in 5. Gaunt faces, sunken eyes, that stressed, wiry look that screams, "I'm running on fumes." Meanwhile, the Italian grandmother eating pasta every night with a glass of wine looks 20 years younger than her chronological age and will probably outlive them all. What's going on here? I call it the biohacker aging paradox, and the answer lies in a fundamental misunderstanding about stress and adaptation that's been marketed to you as cutting-edge science. The biohacking world has embraced a concept called Hormesis. The basic idea is seductive. Small amounts of stress make you stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Expose yourself to cold stress, and you build resilience. Fast for extended periods, and you activate cellular repair. Push yourself to exhaustion, and you force adaptation. It sounds logical, it sounds empowering, it makes suffering feel productive, and it's largely wrong. Or more precisely, it's right in a very narrow context that almost never applies to the chronically stressed, metabolically damaged people following these protocols. Before we get into the science, you need to know where this concept actually came from, because the history tells you everything about why it exists. The term hormesis was coined to describe a specific observation that very low doses of toxic substances sometimes seem to stimulate growth or other beneficial responses. We're talking about things like radiation, heavy metals, pesticides, and here's the part nobody tells you. This concept was aggressively promoted starting around 1950 by the petroleum, chemical, and nuclear industries. When the public started worrying about environmental radioactive fallout from nuclear bomb tests, the U.S. government didn't just suppress information about radiation exposure, they actively promoted the idea that small amounts of radiation were actually beneficial. Think about that. The same industries poisoning our environment funded research, claiming their poisons made us stronger. Convenient, right? Dr. Ray Peat documented this extensively. He noted that hormesis became a convenient justification for industrial negligence, a scientific-sounding excuse for exposing populations to toxic chemicals, radiation, and pollutants. Don't worry about that mercury in the water. Small amounts are hormetic. Those pesticide residues, they're making you more resilient. The original hormesis research looked at supposed benefits from low doses of toxic chemicals, but here's what the researchers conveniently ignored. When they looked at all the data, not just the cherry-picked endpoints, the benefits came at the cost of harm elsewhere. Let me give you a concrete example. Studies on hormetic doses of dioxin, one of the most toxic substances ever created, showed reduced cancer in some organs. Great, right? Except the same dose increased cancer in the liver, lung, tongue, and nasal passages. You traded breast cancer for liver cancer. Is that a benefit? This pattern repeated over and over. Whatever benefit Hormesis supposedly provided came at a cost somewhere else in the body. The organism as a whole didn't improve. It just shifted which systems were damaged. And this original research has morphed into what we see today. The idea that all stress, whether from cold exposure, fasting, or intense exercise, triggers beneficial adaptations that improve our health. It hasn't. And I'm going to prove it. To understand why Hormesis fails, we need to go back to the scientist who actually understood stress, Hans Selye. Selye's work in the mid-20th century laid the foundation for our understanding of the stress response. He developed something called the general adaptation syndrome, which describes how organisms respond to stress in 3 stages. Stage 1 is the alarm reaction. This is the immediate response to any stressor. Adrenaline spikes, cortisol rises, blood pressure increases, heart rate accelerates. Your body is mobilizing resources to deal with a threat. Stage 2 is resistance. If the stress continues, your body adapts to cope with it. You develop greater tolerance to that specific stressor. This is the phase the biohackers love to point to. See, your body is adapting. You're getting stronger. But here's what they conveniently ignore. Stage 3 is exhaustion. If the stress continues long enough, or if it's severe enough, your adaptive capacity is depleted. Systems start to fail, chronic diseases develop, and ultimately, the organism dies. Selye's genius insight was recognizing that all stressors draw from the same adaptive pool. Your body doesn't have separate tanks for cold stress, exercise stress, fasting stress, work stress, and relationship stress. It's all one tank. And when it's empty, it's empty. This is absolutely critical. Your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, cannot distinguish between a cold plunge and a bear attack. It cannot tell the difference between a 48-hour fast and actual famine. It just perceives threat and mobilizes resources to survive. Every time you deliberately stress yourself, you're drawing from the same adaptive pool that's already depleted from modern life. The 40-hour work weeks, the constant blue light exposure, the processed food, the environmental toxins, the lack of sleep, the relationship tensions. You're not building new capacity. You're accelerating exhaustion. And here's what Selye understood that modern biohackers don't. Adaptation to stress doesn't mean improvement. Adaptation means your body is changing to better survive in a hostile environment. Those changes often come at the cost of optimal function. Let me get specific about what happens in your body when you subject yourself to these beneficial stressors. When you jump in an ice bath, your body perceives a life-threatening situation. You're a warm-blooded mammal rapidly losing heat. This is an existential crisis at the cellular level. Your body responds with massive adrenaline release. Cortisol spikes. Blood vessels constrict to preserve core temperature. Thyroid function is suppressed because your body is trying to reduce metabolic heat production to conserve resources. Yes, you heard that right. Cold exposure suppresses thyroid function. The very hormone system that drives your metabolism is downregulated. But wait, the biohackers say. What about brown fat activation? What about norepinephrine? What about those studies showing cold exposure burns calories? Those studies are measuring acute effects. Yes, you burn calories shivering. Yes, norepinephrine spikes. But what happens chronically? Your body adapts by lowering your baseline metabolic rate. You become more efficient at conserving heat, which means burning fewer calories at rest. I had a client named Marcus doing daily cold plunges for 6 months. His morning temperature was 96.8 degrees. His weight was completely stuck despite eating 1,500 calories. His testosterone had crashed. He felt exhausted by 2 p.m. every day, but his biomarkers looked great. HRV was high. Inflammation markers were low. We stopped the cold plunges, started nightly warm baths instead. Within 3 weeks, his temperature hit 98.2 degrees. He dropped 8 pounds without changing his diet. His energy returned. His testosterone recovered. The cold wasn't making him stronger. It was slowly killing his metabolism while producing impressive-looking lab values. The same pattern plays out with fasting. When you don't eat, cortisol rises to maintain blood glucose through gluconeogenesis, literally breaking down your own tissues to make sugar. Adrenaline increases to mobilize fatty acids. Thyroid hormone conversion tanks because your body is trying to conserve energy. People feel amazing during extended fasts. They report mental clarity, elevated mood, increased energy. But that's not health. That's a cortisol and adrenaline high. It's your body in emergency mode. You're quite literally high on stress hormones. The Minnesota starvation experiment from the 1940s showed us exactly what happens with chronic caloric restriction. Healthy young men eating 1,800 calories a day, more than most intermittent fasters, developed obsessive food thoughts, depression, anxiety, and profound metabolic suppression. Their metabolic rate dropped 40%. Some developed what we'd now recognize as eating disorders. And it took years of eating 4,000 to 5,000 calories daily to fully recover their metabolisms. But fasting is hormetic. It activates autophagy. It clears damaged cells. This brings us to the biohacker's favorite buzzword, autophagy. Autophagy is the cellular recycling process. Your cells break down and recycle damaged components. It's essential for health. Dysfunctional autophagy is implicated in virtually every chronic disease. So the biohackers reasoned, if dysfunctional autophagy causes disease, then stimulating more autophagy must be beneficial, and stress activates autophagy. Therefore, stress is beneficial. This is textbook reductionist thinking, and it completely misunderstands how the body actually works. Here's what the biohackers miss. Autophagy is activated by reactive oxygen species, ROS. And ROS production happens in two completely different contexts. Context one is the high-energy state. When your mitochondria are producing abundant ATP and your cellular energy is high, electron buildup at the electron transport chain increases ROS production. This signals for mitochondrial biogenesis and autophagy, adaptive processes that improve your capacity for energy production. In this context, you have the resources to complete the repair and emerge better than before. Context 2 is the low-energy stress state. When mitochondrial function is inhibited by things like nutrient deficiency, toxins, excessive fatty acid oxidation, or chronic stress hormones, ROS also increase. Autophagy is also activated. But in this state, you don't have the energy to complete the repair process. You break things down but can't build them back up. The same signal, autophagy activation, has completely different outcomes depending on your underlying energy status. Think of it like this. Pruning a well-watered, well-fertilized rose bush promotes growth. Hacking at a drought-stressed, nutrient-depleted plant kills it faster. Same action, completely different outcomes based on the underlying health of the organism. The biohackers are largely in state 2. They're chronically stressed, often under-eating, metabolically depleted. Their autophagy activation is breaking down tissue they can't rebuild. They're aging themselves while celebrating their cellular recycling. This is why you can have perfect biomarkers while looking and feeling terrible. You're measuring the alarm signals, not the repair processes. Let's talk about sauna, because this is where timing really matters. Sauna can be beneficial. Heat exposure increases blood flow, promotes relaxation, may support detoxification. Traditional cultures have used heat therapy for millennia. But here's what the biohacking community gets wrong. Sauna after strength training is actually counterproductive. When you lift weights, you create micro damage in muscle tissue. This signals for repair and growth. Inflammation rises temporarily to facilitate this process. This is acute, purposeful inflammation. It's how you get stronger. Then you hop in the sauna. The heat stress triggers a competing inflammatory response. Blood flow that should be delivering nutrients to damaged muscle is diverted to the skin for cooling. The muscle repair process is interrupted. Studies show that post-workout heat exposure can actually blunt hypertrophy. The biohackers do their sauna after every workout thinking they're stacking benefits. They're actually interfering with the one hormetic stress that might actually have been beneficial, the strength training itself. If you're going to use sauna, do it on non-training days. Let your muscles recover without additional stress signals, confusing the process. And for the love of all things metabolic, stop with the contrast therapy, alternating between ice bath and sauna. You're just whipsawing your autonomic nervous system back and forth, never letting either adaptation complete. It's stress for stress's sake. I need to address the elephant in the room, the celebrity biohackers, the podcasters with millions of followers promoting these protocols. I'm not naming names here, but you know who I'm talking about. The neuroscientist pushing cold exposure, the longevity doctor promoting fasting and rapamycin, the performance experts with their elaborate morning routines involving suffering and deprivation. Here's what you need to understand. These people have resources you don't have. Private chefs preparing perfect meals, personal trainers managing their recovery, sleep specialists optimizing their rest, concierge medicine managing every biomarker, stress management that comes from financial security most people will never experience. They can push themselves hard and recover because their entire life is structured around recovery. Then they tell you to jump in ice baths after your 12-hour shift, your 2-hour commute, your minimal sleep, your processed food diet, your chronic financial stress. They're not lying to you on purpose. They genuinely believe what works for them will work for you. They just can't see that you're running on a completely different fuel tank. And here's the darker truth. Many of them are aging poorly despite their protocols. The before and after pictures over 5 years are not kind. The gaunt faces, the lost muscle mass, the graying despite being young. They're experiencing the exhaustion phase in real time while celebrating their optimal biomarkers. Biomarkers measure stress signals, not health. High HRV means your nervous system can respond to stress. It doesn't mean you're healthy. Low inflammation markers mean your immune system isn't actively fighting. It doesn't mean you're free from damage. So what's the alternative? If stress doesn't make us stronger, how do we actually optimize? Support over stress. Every time. Dr. Ray Peat summarized it perfectly. It's important to minimize low-level stressors and injuries and to optimize the protective factors, such as light, carbohydrate, thyroid hormone, carbon dioxide, and a sense of meaningful future. Instead of adding stressors, remove them. Instead of depleting resources, supply them. Instead of triggering emergency adaptations, create conditions for optimal function. Eat enough food. I mean actually enough. 2,500 plus calories for most people trying to restore metabolism. Your cells cannot produce energy without fuel. Stop limiting fuel and wondering why your energy is low. Eat carbohydrates. Glucose is your body's preferred fuel. It produces more ATP per unit of oxygen than fat. It supports thyroid function. It lowers stress hormones. The fear of carbs is literally making you cold, tired, and fat. Get warm. Seek warmth instead of cold. Hot baths, sunlight, adequate clothing. Your body temperature reflects your metabolic rate. Higher temperature means higher energy production, better enzyme function, better everything. Sleep deeply. Rest is when repair happens. Stop optimizing your sleep and just sleep more. 8 to 9 hours minimum for most people restoring metabolism. Reduce actual stressors, the blue light at night, the toxic relationships, the job you hate, the PUFA-laden diet. These are real stressors worth eliminating, not opportunities for hormetic adaptation. Move gently and joyfully. Walk after meals. Do brief strength training twice a week. Dance. Play. Move because it feels good, not to burn calories or trigger stress responses. Support thyroid function. Eat adequately. Avoid goitrogens. Get enough selenium and iodine. Keep your temperature up. Your thyroid is the master metabolic regulator. The longest-lived populations, the blue zones, aren't doing cold plunges and extended fasts. They're eating adequately, moving gently, maintaining strong social connections, and living purposefully. They're supported, not stressed. If you're doing all the right biohacking things and still struggling, if your temperature is low, your energy is flagging, your weight won't budge despite eating nothing, this might be why. You've been stressing a system that needed support. The good news? Recovery starts immediately when you stop the assault. I've seen people gain a full degree of body temperature in 2 weeks just by eating breakfast, ditching the cold exposure, and sleeping more. If this resonates with you, our Bioenergetic Reset program provides the complete roadmap. Monthly coaching calls, personalized protocols, a community of people who've made this shift. Details at biosparkhealth.com. For our deep dive listeners, Sarah Chen and Marcus Thompson are going to blow this wide open in this week's deep dive episode. They'll get into Hans Selye's original research, the reactive oxygen species mechanisms, why the research on C. elegans worms means nothing for human health, and exactly how the longevity industry is aging itself into oblivion. Your body doesn't get stronger through suffering, it gets stronger through support. Stop stressing, start thriving. Until next time, I'm Dr. Steve Presciutti. Stay warm, stay fed, stay skeptical of anyone selling you suffering. If you're curious about how all of this can apply to your heath, reach out today. Hundreds of clients have proved we're right. Are you next?